Fresh piece of cardboard, plenty of room to lay parts. Got the bike in here, and I want to talk about this gasket a little bit. I watched a video from the YouTuber Garage Addiction, and he has a Duke 390. It's got the same motor in it and everything, and he does some videos on it using coolant and him replacing the head gasket. I mean, this is, when I looked up the research on this issue of these bikes online, in the forums and stuff, what I found was KTM found out while they were making bad head gaskets, they were failing on these engines. And they knew about it, and they didn't really talk about it, of course, because why would they? They'd sell less bikes. But I'm wondering, in his video, he did that video, and then like several months later, like 2 weeks ago, he posted another video where he had sold that bike, and the person who bought it said, "Man, it's using coolant." And he's like, "What the heck?" So he bought it back, and it was, still using coolant or whatever. And I'm wondering if it's because he used the prior version of head gasket for his replacement instead of this one. At least I'm crossing my fingers, and that's what I'm hoping for, because yeah, I definitely don't want to have to do this again. Okay, so I've decided before I get too crazy, rip this whole engine apart and everything, I will try a couple products before, I go through all that work. So I noticed it was using coolant one morning. Here's the story for you guys. I looked down after I left a gas station, red lights flashing, coolant over temp. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the heck? And of course, there's no place it could have been leaking. I get to work and I look at the vial. Right now it's spotless, and I'll get to that and why it's so clean looking, but it wasn't. It was milky, and all steamy looking inside, like clearly you've got a head gasket issue or some other issue, whether it's water pump seal related or whatever, but probably the head gasket, knowing what we know about the head gasket from the manufacturer. Anywho, it was drinking a lot of coolant. Well, I've used this product on my cars and stuff in the past. Definitely not for head gaskets, even though it says, block seal type stuff. Doesn't say head gasket. This did not work. I did try this, did not work at all. It's for real small stuff in your block. This I've never used. This head gasket seal, blown head gasket repair, and the outrageous claim they have on the front here. One dosage stops all head gasket coolant problems, guaranteed, and that's in all caps and bold. Well, like Leonidas from the 300 said, we'll put their name to the test. And I've already used this. I've already tried it. If you guys try this, let me give you my story of woe on that. So I put it in. Of course, it's not meant for motorcycles. What is these days, on that kind of stuff. And it clogs up the thermostat, which is a plastic T fitting, and you can't service that thermostat. You cannot service it. So I had to get a new thermostat, and then it clogged up the radiator. It does a real good job of sealing stuff up. I'll give it that much. But I was having more overheat issues, so I have a coolant clean out system I use. I keep one of these in the garage year round. But it has all these T fittings that you can hook to a garden hose. There's your garden hose attachment and all these different size T fittings and stuff. And it's like a $10 clean out kit for vehicles, for cars and stuff, for blowing out all the gook that builds up over the years. So I hook that up, and I blow out the radiator both directions, and I buy just an open T fitting, and I replace the thermostat T fitting, which is that open T, 3/4 inch T, from a hardware store. Doesn't sound good, I know. Anyway, I'm just trying to diagnose this thing to see if I could get it, sealed up. Well, it pretty much instantly after I did that stopped. There was no more. I changed the oil and everything because of I keep motor coat in my bike, so I wasn't worried about. Because if you've seen the Project Farm video on motor coat, it is incredible. He runs an engine for like an hour with nothing but water in the crankcase because motor coat says, can't be washed off with water, and there was no engine wear. He didn't lose any compression. There was no metal contamination in the crankcase, nothing. So I'm not worried about my engine taking damage or nothing as far as when I was doing all this diagnosing and running the engine and crap. But not getting any more coolant in the oil down low. That has stayed clean. And I've put a couple hundred more miles on this and everything. But here we are still making this video, right? Well, it's an hour commute to work one way and another hour back. So there's 2 hours of riding there every day to work, which is why I bought this bike. It's why I bought this size bike. But it's still using a little bit of coolant. I'm not getting any contamination in the crankcase, but that doesn't mean it's not getting into the cylinder and then flashing off and burning and coming out the tailpipe and stuff, right? So I would say it used 2 ounces maybe of coolant in that 2 hours. It's using like an ounce an hour maybe. I'm just kind of ballparking it for you guys. Shouldn't be using any though, right? So that's kind of where I'm at with it right now. It hasn't affected the performance of the bike whatsoever, and you'd never know, you know. You would just never know until it said coolant over temp up there. And then, as you guys have seen, if you've watched my previous video on valve clearance adjustment and stuff, the reservoir is right behind this panel. So you can't just readily check it. You can't even pull off the seat and look down in there. You have to pull this whole side panel off just so you can see if you've been using your reserve coolant or not. So there's not like an easy way to just be kind of out bebopping around and, oh, I'm going to take this bike off, you know, just stuff off and just check my coolant real quick. That'll be cool. No, nobody's doing that. First step for me is I'm going to drain the gas out of this with a little Harbor Freight transfer pump into a gas can. And I've already went through the service manual and kind of cherry picked, you know, the stuff I need to start this repair to do it. And, you know, really just the torque specs and stuff is what I was looking for. I was kind of surprised to find that there was no like gasket sealant used. It just says to reinstall this head gasket. It doesn't say use Loctite number blah 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 like it does for a lot of the other stuff. So that's first step for me. Drain gas. And then the next step I'm going to do is come down here to the water pump area. And there's a little drain bolt right there. It's an 8mm. I'm going to drain all the coolant out of it. You know, it used about 2 ounces in the 2 hours I rode it. So, and then I'll drain the oil as well, of course. I'm going to put a new water pump seal in there too while I'm at it. Well, now that I've already got this far, I found something I didn't know this bike had, but it appears to be a fuel drain line. Right here by the starter on the left-hand side of the bike, you'll see this little rubber strap on your frame, which you should be able to see this whether the bike's put together or not. But you can see it's got a little plug on the end. That line comes up into a Y fitting right here, right? Into your charcoal evap canister, and then back, well, the other side of the Y fitting goes right up into the bottom of your gas tank. So this would probably be the easiest way to drain your gas tank, but I thought I'd show you guys that, so that way maybe you don't have to use the transfer pump like I did, although it was pretty easy. So I took the water pump cover off. I put the nut back on there for now, but I could not get this freaking impeller off of here. I mean, I put pliers on it and tried pulling on it and wiggling it. I couldn't get it off. So I really want to replace that water pump seal, although the guy on the Garage Addiction channel said he replaced it like 3 times. I'm not sure what he did to get that impeller off, but when I get this engine off of here, I don't want to pull this whole case off of here and stuff just to replace that seal, because it never did fix his problem. I thought I would shoot this real quick because some of you have asked, like, could I do an oil change procedure since I'm in the middle of this. One of the first things I do when I change the oil is I pull off this little splash guard deal right here, because that's got to come off. And then when you do go to start changing your oil, this is for your oil filter. It even says it right on there. This is going to come off. And then got two more strainers that are on this bike here. This one's going to cover your exhaust big time. Just flows all over it. So you might stick a piece of cardboard up in there so it kind of drains out. But it's this one right here that comes off, and a strainer comes out of it. The next one's underneath. And that one right there, up under the bike. So that's the other one you got to pull out right there to do oil changes, that is. So clearly there's no coolant contaminant in the oil. There was before I used the head gasket stuff. It's still using coolant. That's the infuriating thing. Is it just getting into the cylinder and then it's burning off, you know what I mean, before it goes into the crankcase? Is it just enough that it gets burned off? I mean, you guys tell me. Alright, there's what it looks like with the oil cap, oil filter cap cover off. What I do is, after I take the bolts out, I beat this with a rubber mallet so I can turn these ears to about like here. And then I grab them with my index fingers and wiggle this off. That being the oil filter, it's a little tough to get out in any conventional way. Maybe you could stick an O-ring pick in there, but I have this real high-powered magnet, and I stick it up to there, and that pulls the oil filter out for me. And here's the other side where we took off this oil screen deal, and you'll pull this off, which is aluminum, and then you'll pull that filter piece out, that strainer right there, with needle-nose pliers. There's another one up in here. I still got to pull it out, but that's that other bolt. You can see I removed the skid plate and everything. Don't do that. You don't have to do all that. I also removed the exhaust, but we all know I'm getting ready to remove the engine. So, all right, for oil, here's the oil I use. A lot of us use this oil. It's good oil. It looks like blood. It's like red when you put it in, which is nice because you can see it in the glass oil gauge, on the bike. Do yourselves a favor, use motor coat, okay? When you do an oil change, for this bike, it's 2 quarts of this and 2 ounces of this. And you'll be glad that you put the motor coat in there, big time. Make sure you buy the whole kit. Don't skimp out and just get the oil filter. You're going to want to get all the new strainers and the aluminum cover bolt, because that one will strip out on you real easy. They're real delicate aluminum threads. It's tough holding the phone to do this, but this is the bolt I'm talking about, this like cover cap bolt, because every time I change the oil I end up needing to replace this anyway. For the price of what you pay for your bike, new strainer, that goes with that, versus, the $30 it costs for this oil refill kit, just get the kit. Just get it. You won't regret that you did it. So I was pulling the PCV valve, well, not really valve, just vent hose off. Oh man, it is so hard to see on this camera, but that thing is plumb full of like just white milky crap. I mean, it's practically clogged completely up. Since, there was coolant in the crankcase at one point, it's going to turn into a vapor and a steam and then try to get pulled up into the intake. Just keep that in mind if you're doing this. You're going to have to clean that out. Well, if you've ever wondered what a Vitpilen looks like without an engine in it, there it is. It takes quite a bit of time to make sure you're not going to break anything. Basically, just anything that looks like it's hooked to the engine, just take it off. Just take it off. And there's only a handful of wire connections. I mean, this one here, I unhooked it up high because it's real hard to get to this one. I tell you, the intake looks spotless. That's good on that. There's one wire coming off the top here. I unhooked that. You can see I left the radiator hose on there, but I will be pulling that off here in just a minute. And then these two, don't try to pull them out of the engine. Just unhook them up top. So there's really not that many wire connectors. You don't have to mark them because they're all different shapes. There's no way you're gonna accidentally hook it up to something different. And in case I forget something, I've got everything labeled except the stuff that's super obvious, like the chain links and the, this coil cover and stuff like that. Doesn't really need, it's pretty self-explanatory. But yeah, got our cardboard set up, keeping my laptop in here for torque specs and stuff and whatever. And of course I printed out a curated cheat sheet from this online as well. This is something you guys have to just buy. I mean, it's watermarked with my email address, so if I was to send it to somebody, they would know. So I would get in big trouble, I'd imagine. And then the thermostat. I was wanting to show you guys the thermostat. I'm going to put a new thermostat on it. What the hell? This is plastic T-fitting, so you can't service these. It's not like you can disassemble this and clean the thermostat or anything. If it was to get clogged up full of debris, you pretty much just have to buy a new thermostat. So, yep, valve cover gasket. I've got that water pump gasket, but it's on the ground over there. I still got to figure out how to get that out. I always keep some scrap 2x4s laying around, so I made myself something to set the motor in so I can do some wrenching on it and it's not setting in the floor. I know once I start having to do torque specs and break the head bolts and stuff, this whole engine's going to want to spin on me. So this will keep it from spinning and keep it at a comfortable working height. Alright, so I got the valve cover off. There's a little blue filter deal or gasket, whatever. This is for the PCV system on the valve cover, and you can see it's just totally clogged up. Absolutely clogged up. Make sure you take that apart and clean it. The only areas that are like this were the hoses and this little cavity here. I will be checking the intake to the throttle body and everything as well. Thought I'd show you guys the top end of this motor here. You can see it looks spotless. I mean, it looks good. It looks great inside. Also, go ahead and check out our timing marks. You can see how the font of the lettering is facing upward, so it's legible. That's what we want. Because remember, this can line up in two different spots. It actually has two different timing marks. And the valve cam lobes are facing up, which is also what we want because we got to redo the timing since we're taking all this apart. Okay, so I checked all my valve shims again before I even loosened anything up. And they all look great. You figure I'm about halfway through the maintenance interval, you're supposed to do them every 9,300 miles, and I'm another halfway through because I did them last time at 9,300. Everything looks good except for one of the intake valves. Matter of fact, they look so good you can still see the writing of the size on them. So that's awesome. I'm only just adjusting the one that's slightly off. And here we are here. Everything's apart. Getting ready to pull the head off here in just a minute. Alright, so I got the head off. It does look pretty dirty. Like, maybe there is some areas where we had some coolant ingress on the head gasket. One could only hope. It does definitely look like it. I sure hope so anyway. And then, here's the other side on the motor. I guess you can kind of see where it looks almost like there was something rubbery. But maybe that's just scorched coolant, I don't know, it's stretchy. It's definitely stretchy. I wonder, the thing is, the service manual doesn't say anything about applying any type of sealant when you go to put this thing back on. So, the underside of it looks just as nasty. Maybe, yeah, I guess the head gasket. Just looking for something definitive because ever since I saw Garage Addiction's video, he ended up having it drink coolant even after he did the repair, so just a little paranoid. Well, I went ahead and polished this up real good just to get that carbon off of there, which was probably more of like a burnt coolant, when you get coolant in your cylinder. Either way, Dremel with a little wire wheel on it. Nothing too crazy. I still need to do some more research on this. I mean, this is I just can't believe that there's no silicone sealant of any kind that you put on this. It's because it's a metal gasket. And again, I mean, I'm sure it gets quite hot, so alrighty. If I find it, it'll be in the video. I was really not wanting to take this lower section of the head off. But honestly, when I started trying to pull the upper section off, it wanted to take the bottom section with it. And I was kind of afraid of that. So I need putting this piston back in the cylinder could be a little tricky. I did buy a cheap little kit that comes with a million sizes for ring compressors so that I can, get it all back together again. There's the pliers. Sorry, I don't own a GoPro. The cylinder looks great. When I pulled this lower gasket off there, like this lower section of the head, there was you could tell there was coolant in here, like it was water beaded up around the sides. So I was cleaning this up, and I tell you what, the more I look at it, the more ticked off I get. Let me explain. Can you see that? Can you see this where this line comes around? Yeah, I'd say you can see that. Look at that shit. It basically comes right into the edge of this casting, this hole for coolant. So that's pretty aggravating. You can see it's nowhere near centered or anything. So that's the timing chain area right there. And then this one over here, it gets really, really damn close. Why is this stuff not centered? You can see how shitty the casting is on this. I mean, just look at that going out there. This one, I mean, it looks like there's plenty of gasket covering it based on the old dirt shadow. But this kind of stuff's ridiculous. Okay, before I even clean this, so it's even easier to see, this is the cylinder head piece. This was the other piece that you can tell the gasket doesn't cover that coolant hole. You can tell it doesn't cover it. It clearly misses it. Look at these. Look how close that is. That's riding the outside edge. I would say, yeah, that could be a big issue. Yeah, look at that one. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, look at that. Yep. You can't tell from pictures, but the shape of this gasket here, there's a little raised lip right there. And that's the lip that's supposed to do the sealing work, the gasket work. And that is that dirt line that you see. I mean, just look at this crap. Every one of these, it's like a paper thin line right there where it's supposedly supposed to be sealing it, and then a ton of portion here. Well, the problem is if it leaks coolant out, especially over here, it's going to go right into the timing chain cover. I bet you they're all like this. This is a manufacturer block here. It's not aftermarket. I would pretty well put money that there's not really a head gasket issue. I think it's a block casting issue, and that's why when the guy from Garage Addiction, I mean, he was very thorough, did his. Oh, it was still having issues, I mean, and he upgraded the cooling system and everything on that bike. I would bet you money that that's probably the issue, because it's very obvious, this outer portion that's raised is the portion that would get crushed and smashed and do the sealing work of the gasket, and it's not able to do it because we're totally missing it. I almost forgot. See all that marring right there? It's all dinged up and looks like crap, like an amateur put this engine together. That was not me. That was there when I took this engine apart. I would say an amateur did put this engine together, There's little divots here too, little dings in the face of this. The one surface of this motorcycle, all these block pieces and head pieces that you would never want to have blemishes on and nicks and dings and crap, it's all tore up, man. It's just this way from the factory. I mean, that's just, I mean, what happened? Like, what happened to this engine at the factory? Was it a new kid? Was it just some kid doing this? They don't have real professionals that do this stuff. I mean, this is ridiculous. So I'm going to try to find me an XSR 700. That's what my plan is from here. I know this video is kind of choppy. I'm sorry, I don't own a GoPro, guys. I'm just some guy in his garage trying to shed the light on this kind of stuff and just share. Okay, you guys will love this. It's cute. I think I gave like 25 or 30 bucks for this kit, which comes with this just ridiculous looking pair of pliers to hold the piston ring compressor together. But something tells me I'm going to need both my hands to do this. So I just wrapped this around here, you know, squished it by hand and put me a couple zip ties. That way I can, you know, slide the cylinder onto the piston. Oops, sorry. Cylinder onto the piston using both hands, line everything up, fight all this timing stuff, and get it back together. And then I can just cut those, rotate this, and pull it out from there. So thought I would share that with you. So you'll need a set of these super long Allens in metric. All right, here's the tool list. They're gonna need everything here. Oh, it's a mess. And then of course this, you'll need one of these to, you know, hold the rings closed so you can slide the cylinder back onto the head. It was a bitch. Don't do it. I wouldn't even waste my time doing it if I was you. I would just go ahead and get rid of this bike right away. If I was you, just, you know, before you even start, you know, finding out you have an issue, I would go ahead and get me something more reliable if I was you guys. I hate to say that about this bike. It's a very attractive bike. That's why I bought this bike. There's nothing like it. As you guys know, it's a very beautiful bike. I really loved riding it. I had a lot of fun on this bike. But I am going to test ride it, make sure it's not using massive amounts of coolant, and go get me a Japanese bike.